So, talking about the prologue, you guys are kind of given like a chance to see what the play is about before the play even starts. It's kind of like you wouldn't go to a movie literally only knowing the title. I mean, if you do, it would be kind of exciting, but also sort of like confusing. And so the prologue is the chance of the chorus line, and the chorus is kind of like the narrators of the play.
Like when you go to a movie, like with your kids, like you don't know if it's like rated R or something.
Right, exactly. You'd be like, oh no, kids, close your eyes. And so this kind of tells you what the play is about before you ever actually start reading it. So it says, two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scenes. From ancient grudge, break, to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end not could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss our toil shall strive to mend. And so I always read it once over, because this, if you notice, is the same format as the sonnets that we were reading, right? 14 lines, iambic pentameter, which you don't need to totally know the details of that, but they all have like the same amount of syllables. And so this is giving us everything we need to know. This is telling us there's two households, right? There's the Capulets and the Montagues, and they're both alike in dignity. They have the same amount of respect, they have the same amount of power, wealth, dignity, all of that. And where does the play take place? Well, it takes place in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Fair meaning beautiful, right? So beautiful Verona, Italy. Think about, it's that coastal breeze and just that idea that, everything is kind of a Renaissance period of discovery. So in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny. So what's a grudge? Yeah, something that you hold against someone, right? So is the grudge a new one? It's ancient, right? So this is an old grudge. We're talking beef between families that was from a long time ago.
So like something like if your like grandfather did something to your like the other grandfather, but you're born like 10 years later or like a century later.
Yeah, and you're like, I don't know why you guys hate each other.
Legacy or something. Exactly.
Oh, I love that. You have to hold that legacy, and that's exactly what this whole play is about, is the idea of legacy and loyalty. And who are you going to be more loyal to? Your family or your friends or your lover or yourself? And so we have this old grudge that's now turned into new mutiny. Do you guys know what mutiny is? Like, oh gosh, there's a mutiny. What's happening? It's like chaos. Everyone's raw and yelling, and a mutiny on a ship would be if all the sailors decided to go against their captain and overthrow him. A mutiny on school could be if you all decided that we're all gonna go against the principal, and it would be a mutiny if everyone just like rose up, right? So the old grudges have turned into new chaos, new fighting, new rowdiness. Mutiny, it's never good. There's never a good type of mutiny, right? It's always going to bring bad. And so the town is dealing with all these people fighting, but it's fighting over something that they don't even remember why they're fighting, right? Like what Nathan said, it's like, your grandpa did something to my grandpa, I think, and like they're pissed off now. I don't really know, but we're supposed to hate each other. It's like, okay, I guess that's the right thing to do if you want to be loyal to your family, but what about society? What about the town? Everyone's fighting and no one even knows why. So that ancient grudge breaks to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. And Shakespeare loves the double entendre, using civil as both like, oh, come on guys, be civil. Let's not fight, let's be civil. But also think like military, civilians, right? You have the military and then you have civilians. Civilians are kind of like the normal people, right? The normies. So he's saying that people who used to be civil and people who aren't like in the army, who aren't, supposed to be fighting, they're now having to fight. Civil blood is making civil hands unclean. These were innocent people before, teenagers. Now they're like stabbing each other and causing chaos in the streets. And it's making their hands unclean, literally, right? Because, you know, blood is dirty, right? But also metaphorically, right? Because like your innocence is taken away when you hurt someone or when you kill someone. And if you think about it, like nowadays, if you had a sword and you like cut someone's leg or cut someone's, you know, cheek or something, it would hurt. It would be horrible. You would go to jail, but they probably wouldn't die, right? But back in Shakespeare's time, there was no such thing as antibiotics. There was no Neosporin. They didn't have anesthetics or anything to cauterize the wound. So you just kept it clean and hoped you didn't die.
It was pretty much fragile.
Yeah, very fragile. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. Everyone was very fragile, and if you got sick, it was a very high chance that you could also die, right? So the idea that you are really losing your innocence when you choose to take someone's blood, because the moment you've taken their blood, you probably have caused them a potential of dying, right? Or at least going through horrible pain.
Also with like their families.
Right, and their whole, think about the after effect, right? If you lose, especially like a male at that time who makes the money and stuff, that really affects them. So really this old grudge is not really working out for anyone because it's causing chaos in the town and everyone's having to fight one another and no one really knows why. Then, from forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. I want you to notice, is there punctuation at the end of this? This is line 5. Is there punctuation? No. There's no punctuation here. It's really important to notice how punctuation is used because that tells you if you need to keep reading or if you need to take a breath. The punctuation here tells us that the sentence is over. The punctuation here tells us that the next sentence is connected, but we can take a breath. But here, there's no punctuation. So we need to read the line as if it's a single, like, continuous line. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. I'm not going from forth the fatal loins of these two foes. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, right? That doesn't sound right because it's not correct. You need to just continue the line if there's no punctuation. Same with this line, right? Whose misadventures, piteous overthrows, do with their death bury their parents' strife. I'm always used to it saying doth. Does yours guys say doth on page 7 or do? For your prologue on page 7, does it say do or doth? I'm just curious because I always, when I like memorized it in high school, it was doth. And the prologue is on page 7. You have to kind of skip through a bunch of the intro stuff. So if there are no page numbers, just skip all that.
Page 7.
Yeah, and so it would be line 7, I believe, or line 8. Is it do with their death or doth with them? Doth. Oh, they have doth. Okay, good. So then this was the Harvard version, but okay. So yeah, I was like, am I misremembering or what? Yeah. So you would continue reading. Whose misadventured, piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife, and that's when the sentence is over. So when you're looking at Shakespeare, you can't read the lines in isolation. If you do, you're going to be so confused, and you're going to be, you know, scratching your head trying to figure out what these fatal loins of these foes are without ever realizing, okay, fatal loins by itself, kind of confusing. But loins, like it's kind of like, you know, your nether regions. I don't know how we know that, but we kind of do, right? Like a loincloth, I guess, is one. But we have more context when what would come from the loins. Oh, people are born. Got it. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. So literally they take their life like they're born. You know, you can picture a baby coming out and just be like, ha, life, I'm alive, right? But it's also telling us how the play ends. And everyone who's read Romeo and Juliet or is planning on reading Romeo and Juliet, they know that the story ends with the lovers killing themselves, right? Double suicide. And so when it says a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, it's that they're born, right? Because from forth the fatal loins, they're born, but also they die. You know, they're kind of fated to die. And that they're star-crossed because stars should never cross. They're fixed in the sky, like, you know, the constellation, the Big Dipper or Orion's Belt. Those don't change, right? Those are things that from, you know, ancient ruins of China to year 3000, the Big Dipper is going to be up there. And those stars don't move. And so the fact that these lovers are star-crossed is really Shakespeare trying to tell you, these people, they were not meant to be together, okay? That was not the plan. No one ever said that that should happen. And it resulted in their suicide, right? Whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parent strife. And again, you might not know misadventured piteous overthrows, but can you see that there are words in there that you do know? Misadventured, okay, adventure, misadventure, bad adventure. Okay, so what do kids go on? Adventures. This would be a bad one. Piteous, maybe you don't know the word piteous, but you know the word pity, right? So they think that these children's, what they did was misadventured. It was like dangerous, exciting, but dangerous. It was sad. And it says overthrows. Maybe you don't know what overthrows mean, but just keep reading. Whose misadventured, piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. So it's not until these people die that the strife of the parents is buried. And sometimes you have to slow it down and really picture, do with their death. Okay, so I have died. Bury. Okay, you bury. What are they burying? The parent strife. What strife? Oh, like strife. Okay, issues, stress, fighting. So when they die, the fighting gets buried. Oh, they're not literally burying something, right? It's a metaphor. Again, Shakespeare loves metaphors. He's always speaking them. So that burying of the parent strife is that finally the feud is over. But what did it take for the feud to be over? The children's death, right? They, in the story, Juliet starts out, she's almost 14. And Romeo, we're never told exactly how old he is, but I imagine he's like 17-ish. Yeah. They die within 3 days of meeting each other. Oh, no. This whole play takes place in like 72 hours. This is actually based on a true story. It's based on two lovers who did take their lives back in Italy. I forget what the Juliet. There is
why
that.
Did they do it together?
Yeah, well, once you'll see the ending. You'll see why. It was very misadventured and very piteous because it wasn't something. It wasn't as simple as we all think, and that's why it's funny because people will sometimes go, "Oh man, the prologue just told us how it ends. Now we know they die." That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is how they die. The interesting part is why they die. The interesting part is whose fault is it that they die. And that's what the story of the play is that leading up. And so we know that that's what buried their parents' strife. And he kind of repeats it here. The fearful passage of their death-marked rage and the continuance of their the fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. So they're saying that this continual rage of the parents is the only thing that's going to stop it is their children's end. That's the only thing that could remove it. And now that's what we're going to watch in these next 2 hours if we were sitting and watching the play. Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's the perfect amount of time because I was just saying how much time this play would take us 2 hours, but we're going to be breaking it into little bits. And at the end, Shakespeare says that if you patiently watch for the next 2 hours, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. That what these people screwed up in and the decisions that they made to kill themselves and to do all the things they did, maybe we can see what they did wrong and we can fix it in our own lives, right? It's kind of saying that, like, let's look at how they screwed up so that we don't screw up in the process. And yeah, that's the prologue. So we can go back into the classroom now. And thank you guys for everything. You think you two could take the paper and then Nasa can take the tripod. I'll pause. Was it actually recording the whole time or no? Oh, good, it was.